Can you explain some of the current ownership structures of our hotels, perhaps in my district in South Maui, and how that relates to what the previous panelists have been talking about, please?
Absolutely. Thanks, Representative. And thanks everybody for participating, both the panelists and the attendees we have. I'm going to share my screen really quickly here. So this here is actually, and again, Representative Wildberger represents South Maui. And this is an example of hotel ownership in South Maui for 4 hotels. I'm going to get to the private equity one last, down there at the Grand Wailea. But the first one is the Andaz and the Fairmont Kealani. Both of those hotels are owned by Host Hotels and Resorts, which is actually a real estate investment trust that's publicly traded. The largest lodging REIT, the acronym is pronounced REIT, in the world. They have, like I said, 2 hotels. One, the Andaz, that's represented by the LW, is the union representation, and the other one, the Fairmont Kealani, which does not have union representation. I'll actually get back to that in a second. But one of the things that I wanted to address, since we're talking about tax issues, is how REITs are actually taxed. And for the past, I believe it's been about 7 years, the Hawaii legislature has been trying to work on getting bills passed that would actually tax REITs more. Right now, it's a little complicated actually how it works, but basically REITs just, they take their profits out of the state and they're not taxed. And the latest bill, Senate Bill 2697, was passed by the Senate just before the COVID shutdown in March. And that would have disallowed dividends paid for deductions for real estate investment trusts for 3 years. And what in that bill, what the state Senate found was that real estate investment trusts have about approximately $17 billion of assets in Hawaii. And pre-pandemic, they made about $1 billion in profit, which would have translated into about $65 million a year in taxes for the state. Obviously, I would think it's pretty easy to guess that they make a little bit less now in the pandemic. The other hotel that I'll actually talk about is owned by MSD Capital, which is Michael Dell, who's a billionaire who started Dell Computer. It's his family office, which basically means the $16 billion that his family has is their own personal wealth, owns the hotel. And again, that hotel does not have union representation, has about 1,000 employees, smaller than one of the biggest hotels out there, just smaller than Grand Wailea. The interesting thing about MSD Capital, they are a family office, and we do have quite a number of billionaires who've invested in Hawaii directly. One of them, Larry Ellison, who's a little bit richer than Michael Dell, bought the island of Lanai, which has 2 hotels on it. And there is a little bit of a difference with if you have ownership by someone where there's one individual who has the power of the investment. In Larry Ellison's case, he actually did decide to continue to pay workers over there who are all represented by LW, continue to pay them even after pandemic shutdown of the tourism industry. Then we get to Blackstone that we've talked a lot about. Blackstone is the largest private equity firm in the world. They own the Grand Wailea, which is also the single largest private sector employer on Maui. Grand Wailea is represented by the LW. And a lot of the issues that both Jason, Delilah, and Imogen have brought up about private equity definitely apply here. They paid a number of years ago when they acquired the Grand Wailea, they paid the second largest price ever paid for a hotel in US history, $1.1 billion. And also, as any private equity deal, most of them are highly leveraged with debt. So that's also an issue. But I think one of the things that's important to keep in mind is that when we're looking at who employers are on Maui and who owns our hotels, and Maui is very dependent on the tourism industry, and one of the reasons why we have the highest unemployment rate in the country over the summer, and it's still very high. We need to actually look at what the ownership structure is. And so you look at, what what people are paying in taxes. And one other thing that I've mentioned about Blackstone, because I already talked about the taxes with the REITs with Ondas and Fairmont Kealani, is that Blackstone's managing partner who actually runs the LLC that owns the Grand Wailea, his expertise is not in hotels or things like that. His expertise is actually in taxes. So it gives you an idea that they do actually, they're paying attention to what taxes they pay, and that's part of the way they structure deals. And the final comment I'll make is it is important. Hawaii is the state with the most unionized employees in the country. And there is a big difference if a hotel is actually unionized. There's a number of different advantages to that. One of them is clearly the unions can negotiate for better wages and benefits. And the second one is even the non-unionized hotels, like we have the two ones here on the list, the workers there will also benefit because the union workers actually raise the sort of prevailing wage of what is required to pay people. And the final point I'll make is that and this is definitely become very clear during COVID, is unionized employees tend to be able to whistleblow more because they can actually go to their union, and that can become very important to keep track of which hotels are really following COVID procedures and protocols and which ones aren't. So anyway, that's a basic overview of the ownership structure in Representative Wildberger's district. And I think it's important that we keep on top of what the ownership structure is so we know who owns our productive assets in Maui. Thanks, Representative.